Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
We weren't the kind of couple people expected to fall apart. At least, that's what I used to think. On paper, we had everything figured out. I worked in systems administration for a healthcare firm. Good pay, flexible hours, always in control of my schedule. My wife, Vanessa, had recently landed a managerial role in a marketing agency. She was sharp, quick with comebacks, magnetic in the way that made other women either admire or despise her. People used to say we balanced each other, her fire, my calm. We were married 5 years. The first 2 were what I'd call the sweet spot. Still newlyweds, still eager to impress. Somewhere in the 3rd year, though, her attitude started shifting in these small, dismissible ways. At first it was the eye rolls when I talked about a back-end problem at work. Then it was the passive-aggressive jokes about how I was a little too comfortable in my career. I remember her saying one night, after dinner, "You ever think you peaked too early?" I laughed, assuming it was a joke. She didn't laugh back. At the time, I brushed it off. Everyone has moods, especially under pressure. And Vanessa was under pressure, no doubt about it. Her company had been expanding, merging with another agency, and suddenly she was surrounded by more ambitious people than she'd ever known. Her whole world had gone from being the smartest in the room to trying to keep up. I could see the fatigue creeping in, first in her posture, then in her eyes. But she didn't slow down. She adapted. She reinvented herself. I watched her transform from my sharp-tongued, slightly messy wife into someone sleeker, physically and emotionally. Her wardrobe changed, inch by inch. Her schedule grew unpredictable. The way she answered questions felt rehearsed, like she was constantly being watched, even at home. One night, I caught her practicing a pitch in front of the bathroom mirror. She didn't stop when I walked in, just looked at me through the reflection and said, "You wouldn't get it, baby. This is war." I didn't think much of it. If anything, I was proud. But pride is a funny thing. It can keep you clapping for someone who's walking right out of your life. It wasn't long before she started talking about someone at her office. Mason. He was one of the new senior consultants brought in after the merger. She said his name like it meant something, like it should already be obvious. Mason did this. Mason thought that. Mason suggested we overhaul the entire campaign, and everyone clapped. The first time I met him was at Vanessa's office party. Tall guy. Loud handshake. Smile too white to be real. He made a point to lock eyes with me. And that's when I got this weird, skin-prickling feeling. Not because I thought something was going on. Not yet. But because he looked at me like he was measuring something. Like I was a number he could already sum up. "You must be Vanessa's husband," he said, like it was the punchline to a joke. That should have been my cue. I should have tuned in harder to what came next. But I didn't. I just smiled, nodded, and made some surface-level joke I can't even remember now. All I know is that he laughed a little too loudly. Vanessa was different after that night. More assertive. Colder, maybe. The little jabs became more frequent. "Why don't you ever dress like Mason? You could probably pull it off if you tried. Have you ever considered doing something different? Like, actually ambitious? You're just so stable. It's boring sometimes." I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I say anything? But when the person you love starts shifting, you don't call it betrayal. You call it growth. You convince yourself they're just evolving. And if you're patient, you'll catch up. What I didn't realize was that Vanessa wasn't evolving. She was detaching. And every time I took one of her comments on the chin, I gave her permission to keep going. One Friday evening, she came home later than usual. Hair curled, makeup fresh, not end of the day, faded like normal. I asked if she'd been out with coworkers. She just smiled and said, "Client dinner." Mason and I had to smooth things over with a potential lead. Then she paused, tossed her heels aside, and added with this pointed kind of smirk, "It's wild how much you can learn from someone who actually pushes himself." She didn't look at me when she said it. Just walked into the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, and poured 1 glass. One. She knew I noticed. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds longer than I should have, staring at that glass, wondering if she'd offer me one out of habit. She didn't. She took a sip, turned on her heel, and disappeared into the living room without a word. I followed, sat across from her, and just watched as she scrolled through her phone like I wasn't even there. That was the first night I felt like I was sharing a house with a stranger. But not the last. The moment it really broke? It wasn't loud. It was a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day. Not some fateful anniversary. Just a normal, gray, dead weekday that decided to gut me with precision. I came home early. Not on purpose. My meeting got canceled, and I figured I'd surprise Vanessa. Maybe we'd cook something together like we used to. Maybe we wouldn't talk about Mason or jobs or career growth. Just us. Real people again, not resumes in a marriage. I parked, stepped inside, and noticed the lights were off in the living room, but I could hear her voice. Soft, upbeat, in that performative tone she only used when she wanted to impress someone. The kitchen door was slightly ajar. I stopped just outside. "He's not like you," she was saying, and I remember her laugh. Light, flirtatious, but with an edge that made my stomach tighten. "He's comfortable. And I get it. I do. That used to be sweet. But you? You're fire. You're the real man." My lungs stalled. He means well, but that's all he ever is. Well-meaning. He doesn't challenge me, doesn't push me. I mean, God, he plays it so safe it's like he's afraid to live. Silence. Then her voice again, lower this time. "You know what I told him once? That ambition scared me. But the truth is, I wanted to be scared. I wanted someone who would grab me by the throat and make me feel something. Not fix a server bug and ask if I wanted chicken or fish." I didn't feel rage in that moment. Just a quiet, full-body numbness. She kept going. "He's the real man you could never be," she said, and laughed again, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That line burned into me. I stepped away before she could see me, backed up, moved through the hallway like a ghost. Went upstairs, locked the bathroom door, and sat down on the edge of the tub. My ears rang. Not from yelling. There hadn't been any. Just that sentence. "He's the real man you could never be." I didn't cry. I didn't smash anything. I just sat there and stared at the tile. The way people probably stare at rubble after a building collapses. You don't know where to begin. You just know nothing's standing anymore. She didn't know I'd heard. That night she came into the bedroom hours later, humming, cheeks flushed with this glow she hadn't had in months. She looked at me, then paused, like she was trying to figure out if I sensed anything. I didn't give her a thing. Just nodded and turned back to my book. She waited. Maybe she expected me to ask how her day was. Maybe she wanted a fight. I didn't give her either. She went to shower. When she returned, I was already under the covers, pretending to sleep. And as she crawled in beside me, I could feel it. The cold wall she didn't even try to cross. That was the real kicker. She'd already chosen. She was just waiting for me to react so she could feel justified. But I wouldn't give her the pleasure. Over the next few days, I let the silence bloom. I didn't ask questions. Didn't accuse. I observed. Every detail. The way she texted with a smile when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she kept her phone face down on the table. The subtle scent of a different cologne on her blazer. The fact that she started using a new perfume when I hadn't bought her. One night, she slipped. She came home late. Said she had a client dinner. Her lipstick was slightly smudged, and there was a faint wine stain on her blouse. She walked into the kitchen, clearly trying to act casual. Then she looked at me and said, "We really should go on a trip sometime. Reconnect." I nodded. "Sure." She smiled, tight, fake, and added, "I feel like we've been in different worlds lately." Still calm. "Yeah, I noticed." She paused, waited for me to expand. I didn't. And then came the test. She tilted her head and asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled. Never better. She studied me for a second. I knew that look. The mental scan. Trying to find the crack. But I wasn't cracking. Because I'd already decided. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to give her the fight she wanted. No drama. No begging. No accusations. Real men don't beg. She made her choice. Now it was my turn. And I don't believe in half measures. I don't know when exactly the numbness turned into clarity. But it did. Somewhere between the second ignored dinner invite and her leaving her phone unattended during a shower, something inside me locked into place. I wasn't going to win her back. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to win in a way that mattered. Vanessa had underestimated me. That was her first mistake. She thought being quiet meant being weak. That stability meant a lack of strategy. But I work in systems. I live in the details. I don't raise my voice. I raise the floor beneath your feet and let you realize too late it's collapsing. She wanted Mason? She could have him. But I was going to make sure she understood exactly what that cost. The first thing I did was pull back. Emotionally, physically. The version of me she'd grown used to, dependable, available, forgiving, that version went dark. I stopped texting her when she worked late. Stopped reminding her to eat or asking about her stress. I became a mirror. If she looked at me, I looked back. If she didn't, I disappeared. She noticed. Not right away. But by week 2, she started testing the waters. Passive check-ins. You've been quiet lately. Just focused, I said, without looking up from my laptop. You okay? Sure. You. She hesitated. Yeah. Just feels like you're distant. Interesting. Nothing more. No bait taken. She backed off. Now came the real work. I'd never cared much about Mason outside of what he symbolized until I started looking into him. It's amazing what people leave out in the open when they think they're untouchable. LinkedIn, company press releases, public reviews, even a few forum threads where he'd been mentioned by name from his previous job. Turns out, Mason wasn't exactly a golden boy. He had a reputation, an HR complaint for inappropriate behavior that had been internally resolved. A questionable departure from his last firm where the story didn't match up depending on who you asked. I even found an old Reddit post from someone claiming their team lead had been fired after Mason took credit for their work. The timeline matched. The language matched. It was vague enough to be missed by most. But I wasn't most. All I needed was a pattern. And now I had one. Meanwhile, I took steps at home. Quietly copied Vanessa's phone backup to a private drive while she slept. Texts, images, everything. No snooping through messages. I wasn't interested in specifics. I just needed proof. Insurance. I also met with a lawyer. Not to file. Just to understand my options. I laid everything out. No, I didn't have hard evidence of cheating. Yes, I suspected. Yes, we had joint assets. No kids, no prenup. The lawyer listened carefully, then gave me a path. If you're not trying to punish her but want to protect yourself, documentation is everything. Don't confront her until you're ready to execute every step at once. Exactly what I needed to hear. That weekend, while she was working late, I met with an old friend of mine, Tom. Tom and I had done side projects together in cybersecurity. Ethical hacking, system audits, back-end forensic work. I asked him for a personal favor. I need to know what Mason's been up to. Professionally. Discreetly. Tom didn't ask questions. Just nodded. Give me 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's all I needed. At home, things started getting weird. Vanessa was growing agitated by my silence. She'd throw in little jabs, like she was trying to bait me back into the ring. You used to be present, you know? You'd ask about my day. I figured Mason was doing a better job. She froze. I said it casually, like I was talking about the weather. She recovered quickly, but the tension stuck in the room like smoke. That night, she slept on the far edge of the bed. I didn't move an inch. 5 days later, Tom came through. Your boy Mason? Real piece of work. His personal laptop's clean, but his work devices, not so much. What do you mean? He's got files he shouldn't have. Client data. Proprietary material. Could be harmless. Could be fireable. Depends on how much his bosses care about NDAs. I exhaled. Slowly. And you can prove this? Tom smirked. I can send a very polite, very anonymous nudge to the right inbox. Won't trace back to you. By the time they figure it out, the mess will be internal. I didn't respond right away. Just nodded, already moving to the next piece. Vanessa had built this fantasy life around Mason. The exciting man. The real man. I wasn't going to touch her fantasy. I was just going to tear down its foundation and let it collapse on her. She'd mocked me. Laughed behind my back. Told someone else he was everything I wasn't. Fine. Now she could have him, stress and all. But she was about to find out that the man she called real couldn't even survive in the real world. And I wasn't done yet. Vanessa didn't notice anything at first. The shift happened slowly, like a subtle glitch in a well-rehearsed performance. She was still walking around like she owned the room, still tossing her hair over her shoulder when she said Mason's name like a brand. But I could see it. The edges of her confidence fraying, one thread at a time. The first sign came 3 days after Tom pulled the trigger. She came home earlier than usual, her heels in one hand, blazer draped over the other, a blank look on her face. Not angry. Not even tired. Just disoriented. They pulled Mason into a closed-door meeting today, she said without looking at me. Oh. I replied, not glancing up from my laptop. Yeah. Apparently someone submitted a tip. Something about unauthorized client files. He says it's all nonsense. Probably just a competitor trying to sabotage him. She waited, probably expecting me to ask questions. I didn't. Just kept typing. She disappeared into the bedroom. A few days later, I overheard her pacing in the kitchen, on the phone with someone, her voice low and tense. No, I didn't know he had those files. Why would I be aware of that? No, I've never seen them. I understand. Of course. Click. She walked back into the living room and stared at me for a long second. You know anything about this? About what? About Mason. The investigation. I blinked. I thought it was sabotage. Her mouth opened, then shut again. And just like that, the seed of doubt bloomed. Mason had been her fantasy man, bold, unpredictable, unapologetically masculine. But men like that rarely come without cost. And as the investigation into his conduct widened, so did the cracks in their little alliance. Vanessa started staying home more. The late night stopped. The secret smiles vanished. Her makeup stayed in the drawer. She was watching her phone like it might explode. 2 days later, she asked, "Have I been different lately?" I looked her in the eye. Yes. She nodded, like she expected that answer. But when I didn't follow it with an olive branch, her face tightened. I just feel like things got away from me. That tends to happen when you stop looking where you're going. She flinched. Is that how you see it? Like I wasn't paying attention? I shrugged. Doesn't matter how I see it. You weren't paying attention. That night she didn't come to bed. I found her asleep on the couch, curled up like a child who'd finally realized no one was coming to rescue them. The next morning, her phone buzzed nonstop. By the third buzz, she picked it up and read the screen with this unreadable expression. Then she whispered he got suspended. She looked up at me. They think he leaked internal forecasts to an outside contractor. Some email trail they're still reviewing. I didn't blink. She kept watching me like I was supposed to react. Yell. Rage. Laugh. Something. But I gave her nothing. She rubbed her temples. I just don't understand how he could have been so reckless. He said he had everything under control. That he'd done this before. And there it was. He'd done this before. I said nothing, just returned to my breakfast. She sat across from me and stared like she was trying to solve a puzzle she'd never imagined she'd need to piece together. Later that day, she got a call from HR. They weren't firing her, but they wanted to review her communications with Mason during active projects. Standard procedure, she said when she hung up. But her hands were shaking. That night, she cooked dinner. The first time in weeks. Set the table, poured wine, lit a candle like we were in the third act of a redemption arc. I know I've been difficult, she said gently. You didn't deserve that. I nodded. She watched me. Don't you have anything to say? I sipped my wine. I'm listening. She folded her napkin. I want to start over. Rebuild. That's a long project. She reached out. I'd rather build with you than with someone who only pretended to care. Is that what he did? Her voice cracked. He said I was different. That I deserved more. Then the moment he got caught, he ghosted me. I haven't heard from him since the suspension. I leaned back in my chair. He gave you exactly what you asked for. She looked up, confused. You told him I wasn't a real man. You said you wanted fire. Chaos. Something that made you feel again. I leaned forward. How's it feel now? She looked like she might break. I made a mistake. No, I said, standing. You made a decision. I walked out of the room, left her sitting there in the candlelight she lit for no one. The next morning, I sent the email to my lawyer. A full copy of her messages with Mason. Date-stamped, time-stamped, backed up. She wouldn't fight it. She couldn't. Not when her fantasy had already turned to ash. Vanessa didn't put up a fight. When the divorce papers arrived at her office, delivered discreetly, folded neatly inside a plain envelope, she didn't call, didn't text. She didn't storm into the house with demands or excuses. She just came home late. Quiet. Pale. She stood in the doorway holding that envelope like it was made of glass. I was already packed. The essentials. The rest I would leave behind. Furniture, photos, reminders. I bought a small condo across town under a separate LLC name months ago. She never noticed the bank transfers. Never noticed much of anything unless it was about her. Is this really happening? She asked. I zipped the last bag. It's been happening for a while. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not in stature. In presence. The glow was gone. The sharp edge in her voice was dulled. Her confidence was cracked like the glass of a champagne flute long since emptied and dropped. I was lost, she tried. Mason made me feel like. I cut her off with a look. Don't. She bit her lip. I just thought you'd fight for me. I nodded. Yeah, that's the part you never understood. She blinked. You mistook my silence for weakness. Thought I didn't know. But I saw everything. I heard everything. I just didn't hand you the reaction you were hoping for. Her eyes glistened, but I kept going. You wanted chaos. A man who'd raise his voice, slap tables, throw punches. You wanted a soap opera. I gave you peace. Predictability. And you outgrew that. Fine. I stepped toward her, not in anger. Just clarity. You told someone else he was the real man. You mocked me behind my back. That was your choice. And now this. I gestured at the envelope in her hand. This is mine. She finally cracked. Tears spilled fast, her breath hitching. He left me, she whispered. He blocked me on everything. HR's reviewing my emails. I might lose my job. My career. I don't even know who I am anymore. I didn't comfort her. That wasn't my role anymore. Maybe now, I said. You'll finally stop confusing chaos for passion. She reached for my arm. Please. I was stupid. I was arrogant. But we can fix this. I gently stepped back. You made your decision the moment you tried to humiliate me to someone else. You said he was the real man I could never be. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off one last time. You were half right. I walked past her, down the hall. My cab was already waiting at the curb. I didn't look back. As I slid into the back seat, the driver asked, "Airport?" "Not yet," I said. "Just drive." He nodded and pulled off. And I watched through the window as the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. That house held a version of me I'd outgrown. A man who tolerated less than he deserved because he thought silence was noble. A man who stayed steady while being chipped away one insult at a time. Vanessa called him boring. Stable. Safe. She wanted fire. So I burned it all down. Quietly. Strategically. Completely. And left her to sift through the ashes with the same hands she once pointed at me in mockery. Mason? He'll turn up eventually. People like him always do. He'll charm another Vanessa into believing he's the upgrade. The real man. But this time, she'll know better. Because real men don't have to raise their voices. Or beg. Or fight. They just leave. And sometimes, that silence is louder than any war.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.